Hey everyone, welcome back to the Ready State. So a couple weeks ago we put up sort of a updated idea around the 10-minute squat test, which is fundamentally, hey, here's a position, this uncompensated shape I should spend some time in. I should practice, I should lean against the wall, primarily because we know that the most important thing you can be doing to change your position or have access to shape or tell your brain you value something is to spend time in that position. So, we love end range flexion of the ankles. We love end range flexion of the hip. We love the back reversing. Again, this is such an important position around moving through the environment until I'm 110, having full access to my positions and power, what does it mean? So what we're trying to get and move along into is the idea that every day is a diagnostic tool day. That every day you train and move, I want you to be able to get more closely and more comfortable feeling, how am I feeling with what I'm doing, with what's going on with my body, so that I don't have to keep running in all these parallel models, right? The thing I need to understand and feel is the squat. Well, how's my squat feel today? Well, that's the thing I need to work on, especially if that's the thing I'm doing today, right? So I start every session with my athletes, my groups in this position. How does this feel? Right? And what we can tell then is, hey, based on the training sessions last week or the training sessions yesterday or the stress in my life or the airplane or the birth of my new child, whatever it is, this is who I am today. It's almost like your range of motion is a credit score and that it's a dynamic document. So today I want to talk a little bit and just give you some ideas about what you were feeling and what that potentially means. So one of the things that we know, is that people complain, or they don't complain, but they definitely share their opinions of why my shins are burning, they're on fire. So one of the reasons we suspect that if you're feeling stiff here, that can be a good indicator of two things. One, most likely that you're missing your end range flexion of your ankles. So this is dorsiflexion, and we're working on this dorsiflexion in this short lever flexion position, right? So the leg is bent, hip is in flexion. And the idea here is that if you are fighting to stay forward, then you are using your shins to basically drag yourself forward into that position, which means that your shins could always be on an isometric hold or are resisting falling backwards by yanking forward. And that's probably the burn you're getting, just that intense burn. And unfortunately, you're not getting fitter with that burn. But it does indicate potentially that, hey, you've got stiffness in this ankle system, or more importantly, you don't have access to this full position of this ankle. That's what that burny shin means. And what it potentially means for your athletics is that if you're using your shin as like an emergency brake guy line, then you're not going to be able to be as quick as you normally would. It's like having a handbrake on the system. I want your shin to be able to adjust for position and tension, absorb force, and do whatever it is, but not fight against your hamstring or your calves in this position. So that may be an implication. Hey, first of all, let me ask you the question. Let's be honest. When's the last time you did anything for your shins? Like take them out for a nice dinner or appreciate them or leave them a note. Hey, great work, shins. Right? No one ever talks about it. So one of the things that we see is, hey, if you've got issues or your body's barking at you or you're feeling uncomfortable in a position, be curious about that. That's the point of this diagnostic. And if you're getting a little burny in this position, that may be a great insight into the fact that you probably haven't mobilized your shins ever, or hey, I need to continue to focus on my end range dorsiflexion, right? I should be able to sit independently of what's going on with my hip. We know the research does not support unique crazy snowflake hip syndrome. But the idea here is that, hey, I should be able to have my feet straight any width that I want and be able to keep that balance between the ball of the foot and the heel and my arches engaged, right? I should be able to sit comfortably. And if I'm struggling with that, great. That's the whole point of training in the first place, is to find our blind spots. And what you've been kind of indoctrinated is, I'm not strong enough. Great, so that's why we're training. I'm not conditioned enough. Great, well, that's why we're training. I don't have my full positions. Great, that's why we're training. So using this idea as this sort of living test case might be easy. So that's a simple one, right? Number two, you find out that maybe you feel it in your hips, right? What's going on with my hips? And that might be an indicator of that you're missing hip flexion. So you can't bring your hip to your body. So here's a quick test on the hip piece. So we choose that bottom position squat and frankly, feet together squat. And I'll talk about this in a second. But my knee should easily be able to come to my chest at like 120 to 130 degrees, right? What we're seeing is that many of us pull our knee to chest and you're like, "Ink." And which means that in order to close this knee down to the hip, I've got to use my hip flexors to basically yank that thing to my chest. Now notice, I said, hey, it doesn't matter how wide your squat is. Well, when you move this knee away from the midline a little bit to almost like a plane of scapula in the shoulder, you're giving yourself a little bit more room in that acetabulum to bring that knee to the chest. You'll have more range here. I should be able to have my foot straight and have this range here, but ideally with the legs straight in line, femur vertical, 120 to 130 degrees on who you talk to. But bottom line, that's this much. And so what you're seeing is if you're falling over backwards, if you can't flex your heels down, that may be, or you can't get your heels down, that could be ankles, but it certainly is part of the conversation why people are vertical. And you can see the difference between, hey, I want to be able to have my torso upright, which means that's going to be a lot more knee forward, or I squat backwards, and the first thing that happens is I end up in a wholly rounded position. And what you're seeing is this combination of don't have dorsiflexion, don't have hip flexion, fall over backwards, right? So keeping in mind that these are simple ideas. Now, I promised you a little quick diagnostic. Is it my ankles? I don't know. Well, let's go. Hip together, or knees together, feet together. That's pretty simple. Well, is it more hip than ankle? Well, that's an easy way to test it. When we're looking for differential diagnosis, we oftentimes load the ankle a little bit more and bring that knee to the chest. This would implicate ankle here, but what you'll see is that if you move the feet out a little bit more, this gives you a little bit more range in the hip because you can have that plane of scapula there. Of course, it's not the scapula, but the idea is you have a little bit more range underneath the hip. So, couple ideas around what is it you're feeling in that bottom position. And clearly, if I ask you a simple question, which one of your tissues is unimportant in here? I mean, your hamstrings are still working, your hips are still working, right? You got to be able to get yourself balanced and upright on this whole thing. But a couple ideas of taking the next step. What's going on? Why am I feeling what I'm feeling? And then the key here is you don't have to fix it today. It doesn't have to be perfect today. You have to improve it today. So if you're using this as a diagnostic, go through a full warm-up. Come back to it. Did it feel better? Well, it should feel better if you did a really good warm-up that helped you reclaim your positions. Our hypothesis is I should have access to my positions cold. The reason I'm warming up is to maybe be more efficient in my positions, or to shift the blood flow from my stomach back into my muscles, or to get the viscosity of the liquids in my knee up, or to get tissues perfused. Ideally, warm up is a chance to work on skill, upregulate and rev up physiology. It's not necessarily to reclaim position, but we don't care. Sometimes a good warm-up means, hey, I need to keep an eye on the minimums in the position. So there's the ideal, I warm up, it's just physiology. And then there's the reality, which is, hey, my warm-up should be taking me to end range, should be getting me prepped. So if I use this, how I feel, do your warm-up, is it better, same, or worse? Well, maybe that tells you, hey, you need to do some specific mobilizations to improve that position. Again, you have this great diagnostic tool, but also it tells you maybe about the effectiveness of your warm-up. Because if you're having a hard time hitting position, and your warm-up isn't addressing the inefficiency of that position and your inability to hit that position, maybe we can tweak the warm-up a little bit. Idea here, we have all the time in the world. We got this. You don't have to be perfect today. Training can make us stiff. Life can make us stiff. The idea is that this gets us back to the baseline. Did you get 7 hours of sleep or more last night? Well, if you didn't, tomorrow night, you have another chance at it. If this squat wasn't effortless today, tomorrow, you have another chance at it.